Alright guys, welcome back to the projects. This is Rishiv with Project Zero. We're continuing on to the second marathon episode, the fourth episode. This is probably in total episode 30 at this point. Focused on the inner workings and the mechanics and the different platforms of podcasting that you can distribute to. And so right now the previous episode, we were leaving off at Podcast Guru, so that would have been yesterday for you guys, but for me it's literally just back to back. Again, all are welcome here. This is the respite shelter. We'll cover that at the end. Anyway, so let's just dive right into it, man. So we're gonna be talking about podcasting. We're gonna be talking about all different platforms, just a continuation off of the past couple of videos and podcasts as well. So here we just went through Podcast Guru and their description. RBA, really bad apps, is the name of their logo, but and then they went through their entire origin story. This company here, full of developers, designers, and biz devs scattered across the globe, partnering together with a podcast guru. And partnering together, that's not quite the right word. They just founded podcast guru as well, and they have their site here, and they go through how the fact that because they are an international endeavor, that this is their strength. This is the beginning of a really bad app story. We're going to make sure it will be a good one. We look forward to improving your digital life for many years to come. So there are a lot of veterans, as they mentioned. These are probably people who have 20, 25, 30, 35 years of industry experience with software development and stuff like that, just coming across the globe. All right, really wholesome story, wholesome background. Unfortunately, though, their site is not updating my podcast. So they might be facing some issues right now in terms of servers and whatnot. I don't really know. Maybe my RSS feed is just not getting across to them. Who knows what it could be. But it's a pretty small site, so we can close it. We also covered in the previous episode WordPress. All right, so let's hop over to more platforms. So it was Pod Hero, there's Bullhorn. Again, just check that out in the previous podcasts on Spotify or YouTube. Either way, you can watch it all there. This is a relief shelter for those without a proper family or without a stable place to call home. All are welcomed here, and specifically for those because it's a relatable experience for me personally. That's why I started this. Anyway, so here we go. Podfiend is another app, mobile app for podcasting. So welcome to your friend podcast player. It's got this really friendly looking, like it's almost kitty like, to be honest. If I'm being totally honest right here, it does look like it's geared more for kids, it seems. You can see there's like a single eye here. It reminds me of back in the 90s, there's that show for CGI. It was one of the first shows that I think they used out there with like CGI and stuff like that. But think of like toys. I was gonna say Toys R Us, but not Toys R Us. Something, I don't remember. Buzz Lightyear was in that. If you can remember what I'm talking about. I'm sorry, I can't believe I forgot the name of this show or this movie. But anyways, Monsters Inc. That's what it reminds me of here. The single eye and that little pink tongue. So I'm so happy that you are here. Let's get you started to listening. You can search for podcasts in the search field in the top. Go through Podfriender to find random podcasts or find a trending podcast below. Trending podcasts at Pod News, The Daily, Podcasting 2.0, The Dan Bongino Show, 100% Retro Live 24/7. That sounds so much like mine. My theme is retro oriented and is live 24/7. Murder, my dude. Interesting. Okay. I want to see what this. How can you have something that's live 24/7? I know how I'm doing it. I'm curious as to see how this person over here is doing their podcast to run it 24/7. Salad with a side of fries. Economist of podcasts. Open arguments. I really like these kinds of things. Critical thinking type stuff. Making Sense with Sam Harris. That's a big name. Sam Harris is a big name. What's going on here? How can you have a live 100% retro? Is it music? What is this? Is a live radio stream with hosts broadcasting live from all over the globe with music that makes you feel young again. Now live in a pod. Okay, it's music. That's why it's live 24/7. Okay, got it. And it's been running since 2014, or I don't know if it's still running now, but I mean, if it wasn't running, I don't see why it would show. Yeah, about 22 hours ago. Seems like it's still running. Okay. Interesting stuff. I think I'll leave this tab open to explore when that video ends. All right, let's hop over to the next one that is distributing my podcast as well. Podcast Republic. Once again, if you have a podcast, you can just distribute to all these platforms as well. Just make sure you submit it. So here it says, get your podcast featured. Okay, let's just read. You've created an awesome podcast and you want to build your listenership. Now let Podcast Republic help you with that. At Podcast Republic, we can help you grow your podcast audience by reaching passionate podcast listeners. You can get your podcast featured in Podcast Republic on the website and in the Android app. Our Android app is one of the most popular apps on Google Play Store with over 4 million downloads. Wow. So this one's actually quite significant. That's a great way to build up your podcast audience. Please email to apps@podcastrepublic.net for detailed information. Get the subscribe button and so on and so forth. Okay, login. I clearly didn't do that. You can add subscribe to the button. Just enter the podcast's Apple Podcast ID and copy the script to your website. So I have entered the ID here, or maybe I guess the URL, the RSS feed. And that's basically how they're distributing my podcast. I want to make sure, however, that in fact it is showcasing I'm not sure why, but enter the Apple Podcast feed here. Let's actually test this, put it to the test. Oh, never mind. No, we are not going to test this. What this does is actually allows you to embed a button for people to listen on your website to your podcast. I do not actually need this, but if you guys have your own website, we just covered WordPress in the previous video. You can see it there. Or previous podcast, we talked about WordPress. And if you have like a higher plan where you can alter and change the HTML and do some embeds, I'm pretty sure you can do it free, but I'm not going to do that. You can definitely do this. That's new. That's a nice feature to have. Okay, next one. Downloads.intercom.cdn.com. Link behavior or display broadcast when Spotify preview. Seems like this one has to do with what? Display available podcast platforms. Display available podcast platforms with Spotify audio preview. All right, what this is, I remember now. This is Linktree. So what this is a little pop-up menu, a separate web page, where you can customize what your podcast link interactive widget on Linktree does. So Linktree, if we go there, which we covered a couple podcasts ago and podcasts or videos ago previously, we actually went through the fact that they have a widget that just captures all of the podcast links and platforms that have your podcast being broadcasted. So you don't actually have to enter all the links yourself. You just enter a single one from podcasters at Spotify, the only link from Anchor, or the RSS feed, or Apple iTunes, I believe. And then it will just automatically, Linktree will scour the entire internet and grab all of the search findings it can possibly find that has your podcast. And then they will have suddenly 25 different links with all your podcasts distributed wherever it's available, including on Deezer, on Bandcamp, well, not Bandcamp, but Deezer, Stitcher, and so on and so forth, Apple iTunes, Amazon Music, it's all there. So you can basically customize what that widget does. Reorder by dragging the items below. Visitors may see a view in a different order depending on their preferences. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, but there's a lot more to this than just Spotify and Apple Podcasts for sure. So that's what this is all about, and I can customize that. Okay. Moving on, I can see here this is our legacy. Just checking out how much time we have here. 9 minutes in. This is a legacy site here from Open Spotify. We just wanted to see whether or not the Spotify podcast was up and running and what it looked like, and we can see that it does work. In fact, looking at it, I can see that they've also updated my keywords. So relief shelter at Project Zero. So relief with instead of respite and with a C instead of a K. That's definitely nice. So then it gets spread easier to an English audience. You can see the most recent podcast upload is a reaction to Erwin versus Armin, what choice to make, right? Anyways, that's a reaction inception kind of video. The rest of these are really old podcasts, and they're only being reached out now. They're actually created about a month ago, but yeah. For the record, I love Spodcast's theme. It's got this crimson red gradient all the way through, scarlet red at the very top. Okay, love it. All right, podcasters.spotify.com. All right, sick. This is what we needed. We said that we accidentally closed a browser tab because we needed that tab to upload more episodes onto Spotify. That's right here. Not Spotify, but all the podcast platforms. So this is the source feed, podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/on-row with a dash. So we're just going to click episode. So you can see, of course, all the links here, right? If you guys visit this website, you can definitely see my podcast, all the socials, all the description. It's very nice to see that it's updated the keywords here. Well, no, they haven't updated it here yet, but it seems like for some reason it's very slow. Over here, the podcasts, all the available platforms, iHeart Studio, iHeart Radio, Castbox. I'm pretty sure they're going to include Google over the coming days because I have updated and added that link as well. So we'll just click on episodes, right? Because we're going to upload episodes after this. And then we'll just leave this here. We're going to shift this tab over to the side. Okay. All right. Hop on over to Spotify for podcasters.com. All right. So this is a lot of stuff to talk about. What I'm going to do is take a quick break, quick 10-second break. So if you guys want to go use the washroom or something, this would be a good time to pause the podcast. It's just for 10 seconds for me personally. I'm just going to pause the recording. And we're back at it again. Just had a quick drink of water. Took more than that, about a minute break. But again, we just edited that out. We just can pause the recording. All right, so hopefully you're back from using the washroom or taking care of whatever your tax is. Maybe you got a spreadsheet out. It's income tax season right now, so that's why that was the first thing came to my mind. All right, so let's get to it, man. This one's going to be quite lengthy. That's why I realized I need a break. So here's a lot of text to read out. We're not going to be reading the whole thing, but what this is clearly a throwback to Spotify for podcasters, their help website and their guide for getting started. So distributing your podcast. This has everything here. Look on the side here. This is amazing resource. If you are a podcaster and you're just getting started, drop by here. This will be super, super helpful. I highly recommend this. This is how I'm pushing out my podcasts. If this is helpful stuff. So you can see all the articles, logging into Spotify for podcasters, creating an episode, getting your podcast on Spotify, distributing your podcast, your RSS feed, recording an episode, uploading or importing, your audio library, understanding your podcast analytics. I just clicked on the link here. Editing audio with waveform editors. Amazing, right? So your RSS feed. This is important for me. I remember that rhymes. Art. Oh. What the hell was that? I have to say what the hell. I can't say the F-bomb because I recognize now that because I'm doing podcasts and the podcasts tend to be a lot more scrutinizing about your language. I do have to be a little bit more filtered, even though I don't want to be. Okay. But your RSS feed, this is something that I had to learn. I had to spend my time learning about this. I didn't know what an RSS feed was. Apparently, it's just a short form acronym for really simplified syndication or something like that. Really simple syndication. Ooh, excuse me. Basically, it's the source for all your podcasts. You need an RSS feed to submit your podcast to platforms outside of Spotify, like Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. If you host your podcast with Spotify, you need to enable your RSS feed. And before you enable it, here's what you need to know. Your email will be publicly available. If you enable your RSS feed, you can submit your podcast to other platforms. Other platforms may scrape your RSS feed without your knowledge. So this has definitely happened to me before. Like I said, going to Linktree, it showed me Bullhorn, Pod Hero, Pod Fiend, all of those different mobile apps that I had no idea and I did not submit my content to. They were aggregators that ended up scraping from my content anyways. So I submitted my podcast to only about 10 to 15 platforms, but at the end of the day, because of these aggregators and podcast content, aggregators, they ended up, it's probably being distributed across 50 to 70 different platforms right now as we speak. Anyways, so you can learn all this stuff you need to know, where to find your RSS feed, all this stuff here, great FAQ. And here are the specific steps for the platforms that that Anchor, or now Spotify for Podcasters, is hosting themselves. So we have steps for submitting podcasts to several platforms here below. Apple Podcasts, 1. 2, Google Podcasts. I just recently, in the 2 videos ago, covered this. Stitcher, Castbox, amazing platform. We'll cover that eventually. Amazon Music, I see it down the road in one of these tabs. Radio Public, also we'll be covering that. Pocket Casts, iHeart Radio, and Overcast. There are a lot of podcast aggregators out there. If you don't see the platform that you want to distribute to it listed here, just search online for instructions on how to distribute to it. More important information about the distribution. So this is important stuff. We're going to run through it. It can take some time for the podcast to appear, right? Some manually approve them personally using humans, right? It's not all just AI or data or algorithms. Your podcast will have a different URL on each platform, right? You generally can't edit them. It's possible, 3, that you may find your podcast on platforms that you didn't manually submit to. Third-party apps sometimes scrape RSS feeds. I mentioned this. 4, right? If your podcast appears twice on one platform, contact us using the message to get on the right one on the version, to get one of the versions removed. And lastly, episodes that contain songs from Spotify's catalog are only available to listeners on Spotify. Makes sense. Anyways, if you host your podcast with Buzzsprout, Libsync, Podbean, or any other host, check out this guide for getting your podcast on Spotify. So this might be relevant for me if I click on this. Right. If you host with one of the aggregator partners, it's easy to submit your podcast to Spotify. If you host with Spotify, it automatically appears on our platforms. Julep, Iono, Fireside, Castos, Captivate, Audio Boom, Acast. All of these are Podomatic. Wow. Aggregate partners. If you host your podcast with one of our aggregate partners, you submit your podcast to Spotify. Wow, look at all this. Simplecast. So I have submitted mine to Simplecast as well. But a lot of these here are, I'm not familiar with Podigy or Podomatic. I want to leave this open now that I see this because if you host with Art19, Asha, Pocket, reach out to Aggregator for more information. I can authorize Spotify as an additional distribution platform. Okay, so we'll leave this open because it's very useful for us. But let's move on to the next tab. That was a lot of reading. I see it's 17 minutes. We gotta wrap this up. Okay. Add your iHeart Radio listing to your Spotify for Podcasters profile. So iHeart Radio. So this is one of those specific guides, right? Submitting your podcast to Castbox, to Google Podcasts, Apple, Amazon Music, iHeart Radio. So this is the iHeart Radio one. Head over to iHeart Radio, submit your podcast, right? Once you're submitted, you can add the link to Spotify for our profile, copy the iHeart Radio podcast URL, head over to our page, edit availability settings. We showcased that already. Paste your iHeart Radio URL, and that'll be that. Okay. So this is mine, for example. Has your Spotify links, your podcaster, your RSS feed, as well as all these links here. And you can see iHeart Radio and a Google Podcasts. I updated Castbox. Okay. So we can close this. We can close that. Let's get rid of this and that. iHeart Radio tab. This tab as well. So we'll finish off with iHeart Radio. Log into iHeart Radio account, enter your podcast RSS feed URL. So this is if you want to distribute it there. Listen to iHeart Radio, reach your audience anywhere. The free iHeart Radio app. This is one of those bigger ones. It's available on over 250 platforms and over 2,000 different connected devices, including smart speakers, digital auto dashes, tablets, wearables, smartphones, virtual assistants, televisions, and gaming consoles. Curiosity, Podcast 100, iHeartRadio Awards, all the way down. This is just their main landing page. And the most important part is this: submit your podcast. So use the form below to submit a new podcast for inclusion on iHeartRadio. And I am successfully logged in on Row. If you didn't recognize this account, add your podcast. In fact, it's already added. And if we already have, you can access your dashboard to manage your podcasts. So settings, dashboard, let's click on that. Okay. Very briefly, it's loading, available, and it's verified. Okay, it's gonna show ID, all that stuff. All right, great stuff. So we can close this. And I can see there's 2 more tabs of iHeartRadio. All episodes here. So this is actually me taking a look. I wanted to see what the episodes on iHeartRadio would look like How do the descriptions look? Are they properly syncing up all my information? So this is the podcast episode. The second one I released ever was if you ain't using TikTok marketing. So it's marketing in TikTok. Stephen He. So down here, you can see all the links on the bio are from the RS Syndicate. The RSS feed are well linked, and everything's working fine. The directory, the description down here, everything looks right with all the links and fair use and everything. So fantastic stuff, and we can close this. So I'll end it off here. There's one last tab here on iHeartRadio, but I can see it's just a duplicate as well. We'll end it off here. We'll close this, and we'll do some work behind the scenes. Right now, we've got to upload all our podcasts over to Spotify, over to YouTube, and over onto Patreon, and then they'll be mass distributed. So that's what we're going to do for now. And I'm going to end this podcast. So thanks for tuning in. Hope you learned something about iHeartRadio, about how to distribute podcasts to what seems to be Podfriend, as well as Pod Hero and other platforms. Also, the guide on Anchor, or what is now Spotify podcasters. Lots of crazy useful information there if you're starting your own podcast. Otherwise, if you have other things you want to share that are unrelated to podcasting, maybe you just drop by and you can say hi, share how your day's been. Of course, this is a very down-to-earth project for the daily commutes, for the everyday person who's got a bunch of responsibilities. I'm very focused on being grounded in reality, so because that is sort of the survival state mentality I had when I was starting the project, and to a certain degree, it still does have that kind of vibe. But anyways, so that's what it is. Thanks for tuning in. This is Rishev. It's time to get to work, and I'm going to start basically uploading, and then look forward to the next episode on podcast where we continue. It seems like to me we'll be moving on to Podbean, so that's what we can look forward to if you guys want. Yeah, Podbean is the next topic, so we'll start talking about Podbean in the next episode, and most likely we'll also do a reaction to a Studio Gek Attack on Titan, so look forward to that as well. This is Rishev. I'm signing out. Peace out, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Wow, it's a lot to cover, man.